But my impression of Franciscan is that there's a very emotional, charismatic dimension to the university spirituality. Is that fair to
Right.
say? Yeah.
There definitely is. It's very focused on, but I think the pressure, which is a good thing for sure, but I think the pressure is more so from the students than anything else.
Yeah.
Um, which starts good and I think quickly gets unhealthy. And I personally could name five people who left the school because of the judgment.
I'm wondering where you guys are at in your faith now. In going out into the world, have you encountered ways of being Catholic that are more that resonate with you more personally?
For me, as I've gotten older, the foundation had been set so long ago that there's never been a doubt in my mind about believing in God. Like I've never questioned my belief in God.
Yeah.
But for my spiritual life, I think from going to Franciscan was when I really was like, okay, these guys are all adults and they have this together. And yeah, I had a good formation, but that doesn't matter if I can't apply it. And I definitely had a lot of conversations with David about that. But I do think at least that started me off well.
Yeah, I mean, my impression of Franciscan University. It's, by the way, here's a funny little aside. Uh, People who haven't gone there call it Steubenville, but the students from there always call it Franciscan.
That is kind of weird, I guess. I have noticed that too.
Yeah. But my impression of Franciscan is that there's a very emotional, charismatic dimension to the university spirituality. Is that fair to
Right.
say? Yeah.
There definitely is. It's very focused on, but I think the pressure, which is a good thing for sure, but I think the pressure is more so from the students than anything else.
Yeah.
Um, which starts good and I think quickly gets unhealthy. And I personally could name five people who left the school because of the judgment. Um,
Yeah.
so I think it is definitely important with Franciscan. It's an amazing school, and I loved every second of going there, and it was awesome for my spiritual formation. But it also really, really, really pinpoints your own spiritual sort of state. Like if you're not in a good place spiritually, someone's going to call you out on it, and that hurts. But it's cool to be at a place where that's normalized.
I think that's a tricky place to be, especially for young adults. Colby, talk to me. In my experience, I've had very secular friends and I've had very Catholic friends. And it's difficult to share values with people uh, who are not living a Catholic faith. We have a difference in worldview. But what I've often found is that people in the Catholic world, just in my experience, have a sort of critical attitude and a judgmental attitude about choices that are made. You said that you had five friends that you can think of that left the university because they felt judged and criticized.
Right.
Do you have any thoughts about that? Do you think that's a common issue among young Catholics?
I think I mean, I'm not going to, well, okay, let me not make an over generalization on the school as a whole or young Catholics, but the people that I knew that went through that were not in a good place spiritually when they got there. Um,
Mm,
so I think part of it is understanding that everybody's at a different place spiritually. And
yeah,
with friends, at least, I think a more important and better way of doing it would not be this is how you get there. It's like, all right, where are you at right now? Like, these are the basic steps that
definitely.
have helped me to where I am. Like, you don't need to be where I'm at right now. You don't have to go to adoration for 2 hours and come out as a new
Sure.
person. Just pray and go to mass and start with the simple things. Because I think in Catholicism, there's a lot of levels to how seriously people take it, right? Like, obviously, there's people who throw the term around, like Alex said, and there's people who devote their life to it, um, like our uncle. So, I definitely think
Yeah,
it depends
and
how you talk about
not only that, it's a great point. Everything you're saying is a great point. Not only that, I think I don't know that. I mean, this is kind of a tricky tightrope to walk here, but I think that there are uh, paths to holiness that during certain periods in someone's life don't always consist of accessing the sacramental life, right?
Right.
Like you're talking about how, like, well, they're going to adoration, not going to adoration, but Pope Benedict talked about there are as many paths to God as there are people, and I like what you said about meeting people where they are, and I think I asked you about young Catholics because I think it's common among young Catholics to out of fear to draw a line between us Catholics and those secular people. These choices that I'm making and the choices that they're making. When the reality is, like, dude, I'm a mess. Like I've sinned like 15 times in the last like hour. Dissolve this idea that it's us Catholics and those sinners. The joke about this show is it's called the Catholic Sinner Show. Like, well, who do you think the sinner is? Like me, dude. Like I'm the sinner. And I want to be able to meet people where they are and accept that, like, God's, from my standpoint, from a Catholic perspective, God's got them. I don't need to judge them. God's got them and the path that they're on. Even if their decisions and their choices and their values are different than the way I'm living, God has them. If I believe he's God, then I got to trust him that he's got this. And in fact, what I've realized, I think, within myself is those times where I'm feeling critical or judgmental of other people's choices, like, I'm way harder on myself than I am on other people. And it's really learning about how to, like, extend mercy to myself way before I can connect with other people. Does this, I see some head nods. Does this resonate with anyone here?
Yeah, and I think it's part of what you were talking about earlier with um, the judgment that you've seen in the church and with Catholics. Um, the line that we have to walk is we're called to holiness, and that holiness is real. And it's a disservice to people to act like that's not real and that that's not like a unique thing that just living your life is going to offer you. Like, they
It's
are
such a
not
personal call.
exactly. But when you are living that and you see people who may not have any desire to do so, especially it's hard in a place like Franciscan, because there's kind of a default premise that you think everyone who's there is like a practicing Catholic. And in the
Yeah.
same way that Alex was talking about with Catholic high school, a lot of kids are made to go there. Like, they
Yeah.
graduated and it's like, mom and dad are going to pay for one school. Like, if you want to go to Steubenville, it's covered. If you want to go everywhere else, like, good luck. So I think there is a difficulty at a
That's a
school
tough
like
place to
that.
be in for a kid, right? The amount of
Definitely.
pressure, and then
Mhm.
and then there's the risk too of, like, if there's that kind of focus and control from a parent to be a very explicit version of living a life of faith, that if you have a problem with your parents and there's a part of you that rejects your relationship with your parents, you're also going to reject faith because there's
Mhm.
that association of your parents with faith.
Yeah. What I encountered there, so we talked about this earlier. I went to Arizona State. I went to Franciscan for their study abroad, but I didn't go there. Um, but what I noticed there, um, that I think is cool is they are aware of that. Like,
Hmm.
talking to our uncle who is at Steubenville and talking to other students and professors that we know,
Yeah.
like, they are perfectly aware that that's the reality. And what they try to do is provide opportunities for students to encounter the Lord themselves. And I think that's what matters, because what all of them kind of talked about with City of the Lord, if you don't have a personal encounter with God, all of this is kind of pointless. Like,
It's
you're
just
going to
yeah,
eventually,
it becomes like duty.
yeah. And duty's valid. Like, duty is a step in
Sure.
authentic love. Like, you're doing it because you know it's what you ought to do.
Yes.
But if that's all it is, like, it's not as strong as true love. Like, truly encountering God and being like, I know who I'm following and the faith that I have, and it's worth doing all of this.